testing, which is always number one, the analyst, the text summarization, text analysis, those emerge. What also emerged and people started putting to use were the service operations in day-to-day. Then the whole thing about engineering and development, people started using it. It's not about using the co-pilots for development, but it is about testers giving developers a run, because they started using this to build their test suites and saying, I can test all your corner cases, you better get your act together, right? And the other important part was the whole DEI angle. Some of the colleagues started thinking, I'm so grateful about having this friendly person here in everybody, those who cannot hear. So this is really great. So the team started working on it as something important. And one of the use cases that emerged was for people with visual challenge. So how can we really use generative AI to make it happen, right? So these are some of the areas we touched on. But again, the beauty was in providing a safe environment for people to try. And I think that's how we are marching forward. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Let me move to Pradeep. Pradeep.
Yeah. So Ankit, you talked about different use cases and how, industry is adopting. Interestingly, in November 2022, when GenAI became the new kid in the block, within, 60 days, it hit 100 million subscription or user base, right? It's the fastest adoption that has ever happened. And you ask this question in the room, how many are actually adopting? But 53% of the executives today say that they're experimenting with, GenAI. Over 60% of the, executives and board are talking about GenAI. Over 60% again, or CIOs have GenAI as their priority, technology priority for amongst everything else. So clearly, it is of a high relevance, something that we all should be looking forward to. So if you look at larger use cases in the industry that are happening, and you touched upon some of them, I would probably put them into 4 C's, right? One is the customer experience part of it. Whether you talk about conversation AI, virtual assistants, natural language processing, a whole lot of those things. The second one I would say is content creation, right? Essentially your coding, writings, different language conversions, whole lot of that. The third one is a content discovery. How do you use your own context and bring out insights from your organization to make it more relevant for yourself? So the content discovery part of it is the one. The last one is around code, right? I call it assisted code generation, which is an interesting field now. I think we probably have seen asking, OpenAI convert, give me a code for Python to do XYZ things, it would give you. But more than that, there are different other use cases that we can adopt. So what we've started looking at it is, and you touched upon legal as one of the last items. Overall, from a Gartner perspective, about 13% of the organizations are looking at legal as a case study for GenAI. So what we are trying to do is, there are a lot of litigations that each company needs to go through. And what we have done is we've fed GenAI with a lot of those scenarios to look at which of the legal counsels are more successful for us and have faster turnarounds. That's one case where we've adopted. The second one is when new laws come out, it is ability for us to figure out which laws are applicable in which regions, so that the entire narrative can be done through GenAI now rather than legal counsel getting involved. Similarly, a lot of things about HR policies. We've grown inorganically over the last 5-6 years. We have different policies. Individuals who have spent time in the company from different companies have different representations, and now through GenAI we're able to give them a conversational platform through which they not only know about their own policies, but they could say, hey, I'm traveling from India to Singapore. Tell me what is applicable to me, what my per diems are, what policies are applicable, etc. So all of that is now being used through GenAI. The third, I think, an interesting area that we are looking at is absolutely around code generation part of it, which we are helping our customers on that. So that's how we've started looking at it internally. Obviously, there are several case studies from an external standpoint along these lines, which is content generation, content creation, or for that matter, code part of it.
Thank you, Pradeep. Sudha.
Hi, everybody. I think as a follow-up to Sugandha's call out, the before lunch session, if you haven't used GenAI or ChatGPT, I will bet you anything, maybe a thumbs up, that your kids have.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very tumultuous year, exciting year. And from a what is Thomson Reuters doing about it perspective, I'll just add on to what Pradeep said about the strategies that we've been adopting. First of all, our CEO was came out with a pretty ambitious agenda with GenAI and, set some targets around what we would do. But from a strategy perspective, we've been deliberate about having a external facing GenAI strategy and an internal facing GenAI strategy. So, and why are we being deliberate about that is it's a different process for marketing, product, et cetera, to figure out where GenAI plays a role in the products and services. And to that end, it's been a very focused effort. It's been a lot of partnerships with Open Arena, of course, but also, the Microsoft and other partners. And so we have gone out to market with a couple of products already released. One is the AI research assistant that's available with our flagship product, Westlake. The second one is what we're going to be releasing with CoCounsel and Case Text, which has been a recent acquisition of Thomson Reuters. So those are the things that continue to be delivered and will continue to be area of focus for our external facing strategy. But from an internal perspective, like Pradeep said, we largely look at it in three areas. The employee productivity and what makes our employees more productive. To that end, of course, we're part of probably a lot of global companies that are partnering with Microsoft and the Copilot usage, both for sales and office, et cetera. And that's been very interesting. We have a ways to go, but I think we're absolutely, it's been very rewarding to work with other companies and clients in that category and keep learning as we go. The second is, of course, with GitHub and what we can do with code and development, platform engineering, et cetera. And the third, but I think this is going to be the one that we'll all be working with our SaaS providers to see what their GenAI strategies and roadmaps are and how that would impact us. So, all of our SaaS providers, the large ones being ServiceNow, Salesforce, SAP, et cetera. So that's kind of been the strategy that we've adopted. Suffice to say, it's running in parallel with what that means to the workforce and what we need to do to make sure that our folks are ready for this.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very great insights, how you have been dabbling. So let me jump to you, Pradeep, right? When you have seen your customers adopting GenAI, what are the challenges? What's the process? What do you see on that?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of interesting areas that I would call out. One is about how much would you use the publicly available information versus how much would you bring your context. We call it as an augmented approach, which is essentially a combination of bring your contextualization on top of the LLMs that are available. So that's definitely an area that we look at. The second is, most of this is, I call it as the data fabric that is required for an organization for their GenAI to work effectively. An important element is to look at is, do you have right data privacy, data integrity kind of things? Because data integrity becomes clearly an important dimension. So second area I would look at is organizations who are adopting it, how well do they have the data strategy in place and how long has it been there? It feeds into their big data and a whole lot of other things as well. So there's a second area that, I think it's an area that we should look at from a challenge standpoint. The third, an interesting area where all of us are worried about is IP, right? What happens, with the adoption of GenAI, unknowingly, a lot of information is fed back through the prompts into the models. And that can become a publicly available information. And that's the fear. When I talked about moving to 100 million in 60 days, you don't know how much information you've actually already fed into it unknowingly. So the IP and threat and competitive intelligence that goes into it is another area that organizations need to be clearly, worried about. Largely, I think it is all about ethics. How much do you want to govern it? There are obviously industry level, country level governance that are available, but it's also about within your organization, how are you treating with it? Large scale adoption also means large scale risk in each of these areas. So I would say data, IP is going to be important areas, along with how effectively are you utilizing within your organization. To me, the use cases are plenty, right? It's not about use cases. It's also about how are you articulating that value of your use case. To give you an example, I think instead of saying I'm using GenAI in my operations, it could be saying how are you improving your operational efficiency through GenAI? Are you making your supply chain effective? Are you making sure that you're able to discover more faster? Are you able to improve your product life cycle? A whole lot of those things becomes an important thing to articulate. Today, organizations are struggling. The reason whereas if you only 53% are actually experimenting, right? The reason they're still in experimentation is because of most of them still haven't figured out how to articulate this value, because there is underlying cost involved to this whole thing as well.
Great. I think to summarize value of the use case, data and IP. These are the three things, right? As per you. Great. What about you?
No, I think he summarized it pretty well. I think the strategy, right? You do not want to actually dip in every ball. You want to know what you're focusing on. So for our case, see, data is core for us. So we strategically aligned with all the initiatives of GenAI around that. In fact, some of the client engagement modules that we have published, which is there externally available around data intelligence and market intelligence that was the strategic approach, right? The one thing I'll just add to what Pradeep said is, yes, you need to be aware of the data privacy, but there's also this whole compliance and regulatory angle, right? The angle which is, does my industry, what is the way they will accept the outcome, or what is the way they will, like to see the outcome? That is one thing. And second thing, I just want to add on what Pradeep said, which is what we noticed internally, right? It's one thing about using the platform. It is another thing about knowing how to use it. So when we said we created a safe environment, that was one of the strategy. It is about educating folks on knowing what are the parameters you need to apply. Because you can go wild with the playground and you can get completely hallucinated outcomes, or you can control those and know what it is, right? And we also brought in the whole aspect that, yes, there is information coming in, but like we say, with a pinch of salt, here it is the human in the loop is going to make it really relevant. So I think that's important. Know the problem space. Otherwise, if you want to open it up for each of your sectors, ask them to think, which is the one which will make it faster time to market. It's not about thinking that GenAI is going to be this silver bullet or the panacea for everything, but more like what can accelerate my time to market and then work towards it. So that's what I would add on.
I think great point, right? See, GenAI is not a magic wand, right? It should be definitely identified based on the use case and need. You might have a simple ML, algorithm which can solve your problem. Why you need GenAI, right? So I think that is very important, and that comes back to the value, right? You cannot use GenAI for everything and anything, right? So thank you, Sugandha. So let me jump to you, Sudha. Sudha, so let's assume companies are trying to adopt. Okay. Now the next big challenge which comes is basically the workforce, right? How do you enable your workforce? So how do you see that? How have Reuters done it?
Yeah, I think, I'll just talk about our own journey with that TRS chosen to take, which is the internal GenAI strategy. That it's an initiative that has utmost importance. It is actually sponsored by our chief people officer from an HR and employee perspective, and the head of technology and operations, so our COO. So you're bringing your process, technology, and people together. And what is GenAI going to do, and the impact that it's going to have, and how do we prepare for it? So it's inclusive of thinking about org design. It's inclusive of thinking about and making sure that you're ready for the change and adoption that needs to happen. So it's, I talked about being deliberate. We're also all of our internal functions, finance, HR, sales, marketing, customer support, we've been working with them to make sure that we have prioritized the opportunities and the use cases. So it's not like a free for all, and we're very laser focused on the things that we want to achieve, the results that we expect to see, and then obviously we around that we're looking at the guardrails that we need to put in place. I think both Sugandha and Pradeep talked about, what kind of identity management controls, access management, ethical, where are we in using these large language models and things like that? How do we make sure that we have the quality checks in place? In addition to, the employee training, and, we've been, again, focused on what kind of training is necessary for the technology space versus, the operational space. So it's not going to be a one size fits all, right? So that's kind of been the approach that we've taken. And I think that's the journey that we'll stay on. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So on the same note, I think let me add. So what we have been seeing in industry, right? GenAI internal workforce reskilling has been done massively, right? We hear a lot of $1 billion getting invested on GenAI, COEs and setups, major reskilling. So right, I think every company is definitely working internally to reskill their people and make it ready for India for the future, right? And if you see, in a way, India is a workforce powerhouse for the world, right? And if we are not ready, I think we'll miss the bus. So that's how we see it. So any comments on workforce from you?
Yeah, on the workforce skilling, I would like to add, right? We typically look at hackathons more from generating idea, but I have used it in the past for workforce skilling as well. And it plays a good role. In fact, for the whole GenAI, we kept hearing buzz on the floor, people talking about, I really want to use this, we can do this. So once we built that safe environment, it was just 2 months. We had over, I think 400, 500 people just took up the courses and they came and participated in the hackathon. And the beauty is these are not all core tech people. So the whole prompt engineering aspect appealed to the people who are, say, analysts or in the business of interacting with clients. And the folks who are hardcore technology who like to code took this as an opportunity to say how I can code outcomes from the PE interaction into applications, right? So I think you should use hackathons. It also brings out what is your company thinking, what are your colleagues thinking about, and you can actually also see the appetite where people can go.
Excellent point. I think what you have done is basically ask the end user how they can use the technology, right? So perfect, great. So let me move again back to you, Sudha. So Sudha, what are the first steps any company or any enterprise or any individual they should think when they are starting with GenAI journey, right? What's the first probably initial use cases, initial areas they should think of?
And I think that's an excellent question, and something that we spent weeks thinking and still thinking about that. I think the journey that we've chosen to take is, again, making sure that we laser focused on the prioritized use cases. And for example, if HR is looking at, what are the kind of use cases that they want to prioritize, it's not just about looking at it internally, what can we do with Workday or what can we do to, accelerate the onboarding process. It's also about looking at from a larger workforce perspective, what can we do to make sure that our workforce is ready? And everybody is in a different place, different function, different from an age group perspective even. And so it's going to mean different things. So we're working very closely with our business unit leaders to make sure that, they're not taking off the bigger bite than is sensible. And then, like I said earlier, to bring build the framework around that. But I think from an employee perspective, it's about the skills, it's about the change management, it's about there's anxiety around this, right? So we don't even know what GenAI is going to do into our day-to-day lives. And what does it mean to our healthcare information? What does it mean to our, all of our identity information that's out there? We look at all kinds of things that are coming in the news as we speak. So I think making sure that we educate ourselves and our employees and continue to do that. It's not about we know the answers. I don't think any of us have the answers. It's going to be an evolving process, but more than anything, like, our CEO likes to say, it's not about AI replacing humans. It's about a human who uses AI will replace a human that doesn't. So I think it's going to be an evolving journey, and we're working with our partners and our employees to get there.
Great. Thank you. So let me probably ask you the final question, then we'll open up for questions, right? So when we are setting up GenAI functions, use cases, Pradeep, what are the guardrails or what are the safety measures people should think of?
I think an important, areas to first of all understand is there are going to be algorithmic biases. Bias is a big problem right now. Hallucination. I think factual inaccuracies that it can create, marginalization, and all of these are serious issues, right? I think we need to deal that in a very constructive way. And that requires, like you said, a lot of guardrails within the organization. What is your AI and ethics commission going to look like? What is the construct of it? Who's going to chair it? What is acceptable to your organization? What is not? Second, an area that is today we grapple with, we get an output, we don't know whether we should trust it or not, right? So how do you build that trust? The way to build the trust is make it more explainable to you, right? So transparency of your algorithms and how algorithms are going to behave is going to be extremely important. And for that, you need, someone who's actively looking at how are you inducing them, monitor the whole thing in the whole value chain of this, not just the adoption part of it, but how are you introducing new algorithms? What do you completely understand how it reads, analyzes, and produces output? Keep the value chain clearly visible to your stakeholders. That's explainable AI as it's called. And that's an important, earlier we were talking about, the panel was talking about, I think Dr. Manjula was talking about, how I think AI, scares people because how much information you give away, right? And in her case, she was talking about some gynec issues and, patients do not want to give a lot of information away. And imagine that is fed into a engine and it throws up, it becomes a serious issue. I think how do you manage all of that is going to be important element. So ethics, I would say, is an important thing. How you derive your use cases, absolutely important thing. But how you educate your larger, your workforce to the points that Sudha and Sugandha talked about. I think those will important. Understanding the compliance and regulatory requirements, right? We have GDPR, a whole lot of those things that play a role, data privacy related things. But as you know, the countries are also have taken started taking a step forward in that. US obviously in October introduced this bill. Singapore has something called AI Verify, which means that any AI system that you develop, you have to put through AI Verify to make sure that it actually follows all the ethical guidelines. So a lot of those, both from an organization standpoint, as well as I would say industry and government standpoint, will be equally required for us to have a safe and secure, use of generative AI.
I just want to add 2 points, right? So one is everything on the data, what he said is important. The way in your enterprise today, you are monitoring the traffic that is going out. So I think as you design your environment to use any of these OpenAI playground or any of the other models in the market, right? Just ensure that you know how you can monitor what is going out and help educate the organization on that. Second thing is also about the prompts, right? Which is hitting your intranet data. So they say that a lot of the gaps or the cybersecurity exposures happen even within the enterprise, right? So having a handle on that, I think that will be very helpful. So that is one thing. And of course, the other thing is when we spoke about the education and the explainable point, right? In fact, a lot of the business that we do with data, we actually trace it and show the clients where it has come from. So I think anytime you're using a content, anytime you're using, make sure you know the source And also respect the source is also important, especially when you're experimenting. Like Pradeep said, right, in the beginning, everyone used left, right, center, the platform. You forgot to even turn off, perhaps, turn off history and training when you're asking the questions. But now everyone is educated. They go and turn that off and ask, right? So I think at least understand the system. Don't stop the innovation, but understand and make it happen. That's what I would add.
Perfect. I think very important point, because when this technology is like Gen AI, we are experimenting on a personal capacity or business, right? We should be very thoughtful of what we put in, right? It's very important for us in terms of as a user, right? When we use as a developer or researcher. So thank you very much for your points. So we open up for questions. Are there any questions? Okay. So we start with gentleman here. Is there a mic?
Hi, I'm Shrikant. My question is about what kind of opportunities do we see from a standpoint of, let me say I want to start a startup, I want to reskill. I can primarily list out 3 different opportunities. Let me know if there are more. Do you think creating an alternative to ChatGPT would make more sense? Or do you think building products on top of ChatGPT or BART would make more sense? Or do you think building an algorithm, LLP, LLM model itself would make more sense? So where do we see maximum opportunity from your experience?
Anyone wants to attend?
Yeah, I'll start and maybe you can continue. We were talking about it earlier too. So I think starting an LLM, so any of these, right? So let's take, if you want to create your own LLM models, you have to remember what all goes into doing that, right? So it is, one thing is about the corpus, second thing is about the whole compute machinery that you need, and third thing is everything around legal and the governance aspect, right? Are you prepared to have all of that? Then yes, check out that place. Again, find a niche area. If you really see the models in the market, each one has a business space or a domain that it is catering to. So you may want to do some homework in that space and then pick one. If you don't want to be in the LLM business, but you're more like, I want to provide end user capabilities or end user benefit, in which case it could be a true parallel to ChatGPT, but it could be in any other form. Like I said, you can code applications to using the content, right? So you can then determine a business, what is a value prop, what is the outcome. All the guardrails still apply, but that is how you can differentiate. If you're able to bring I don't want to say capability, if you're able to bring a benefit, faster time to market, then yes, you can structure your business around that. That's how I would say.
Yeah, so just to add, I think, get a view of your deployment models. Like it could be a SaaS, it could be a hybrid model where you're adopting something from a hyperscaler, or it could be a private cloud. In each of these areas, the amount of effort that you spend, the cost varies by application, APIs, the models that you're going to use. So be cognizant of that, because very clearly the real issue is the cost quickly moves up based on how much tokenization you're doing, how long you want this model lifespan, a whole lot of other parameters, how many parameters you're actually monitoring. All of this increases your cost. Being cognizant of that is important, especially for a startup. It's important to kind of articulate that clearly. Do I need whole set of things, or do I have to identify an MVP which is more pertinent to your scenario?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to that, I think very well summarized. It depends on in the industry, the services, whether it's a product that you're looking at or services that you're providing. I think make sure that you understand the opportunity that you have, and to Pradeep's point, understand also the guardrails and the infrastructure that you need to build around it. Access is absolutely, and identity is absolutely super critical for anything that you take to market, and that comes at a cost. So be finite about the data that you're working with, and transparency is key. So that is a evolving, I think, journey that you have with your customers, and make sure that they always have the transparency as to the content that is being used and how you're using the information, whether it's theirs or your own.
Good. Great. Thank you. Probably 4 points from me. One is, I think you have to see from four angles, right? First is use case. As a startup, you are there to solve the problem, right? So GenAI, ML, any technology doesn't matter. First, identify a problem where you find a niche, which Sugandha said, right? You have to find that. Second is technology. Again, open versus closed is a question you have to think. Building LLM doesn't make sense for a startup. If you are in that game, then you would already know. I don't think you are. So you have to think open versus closed. You choose based on the current technical capacity you have and funding you have. Third is data, right? We support many GenAI startups, right? In our GenAI Foundry program. The biggest thing is data, right? Many of our startups have built their own data, right? So where do you get that data? Fourth, I think the important piece is because as a startup, you should go global. You should have the regularity and responsible AI piece at the center when you start developing. Otherwise, you develop the whole product, then you come back and develop, it will be a lot of iteration, right? So, yeah, okay. We can go here.
We are just taking the last final question.
Okay, hi, this is Rajesh from Naotech. So my question is, so we are basically speaking on Gen AI, how it is useful in the industry side. But from the educational institute part of it, so what are the guardrails we should have on the education side of it? Because every kid has access to Gen AI. So his rational thought process or his thought process might depreciate because he can easily access the solutions, right? So it might tamper his ability to think. So,
I don't know. I'm tempted to answer this, but let's have Ankit start and then you can.
Okay, so see, the point is that, we always used to use pen, right? We moved to typewriter. We moved to computers, right? So technology has enabled humans to learn and think and do things differently, right? So GenAI is just a tool, right? Now, we all as human beings, we have been given that gift. We have to use and we have to use the best capable possibility. Now, coming back to the education academia, there are, systems getting developed which can identify when it is plagiarized, it is not plagiarized, right? So when you generate something from ChatGPT or Bard, there are mechanisms getting developed which can say this is generated by some algorithm, right? So you'll be caught there, right? So it's not about how you use it. It's how you use it so that you can generate better output from that, right? So I don't think plagiarism will go for long because there are systems getting developed on that, right? So that's my answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add on, right? So I like what my daughter's school did. This was about how can you really use it, but not lose your creativity. In fact, it will come, forget GenAI, even with your search capabilities, you had to adopt it, right? The instant reaction that every student does is there's a problem statement, let's go Google it, right? So that is the part that I think as academia, we need to encourage the students to do, which is do not look for a solution right away. Go through the process of thinking and then use the information to validate and support. In fact, in the Hindu, it was published about, research scientists having concerns over it that all the papers that will get published will not have the original effect, but more the synthetic, right? So I think for academia, I really like what my daughter's school did. And I think that's what we should do. Use it, but first think, and then use it to just complement or support.
No, I think I agree with everything, Ankit and Sugandha said. An area which will evolve over a period of time is, like the way we have watermark, there'll be watermarks on these things as well. So that people know how you have generated, where you have generated this from. Today, I think our human intelligence, if you ask 10 people to actually take output from GenAI, you'll be able to figure out it's actually GenAI output. Absolutely. And that human intelligence you cannot replace. By the way, there is artificial general intelligence, which is
especially the emails, right? You see emails written.
That is where I think we will have a bigger problem. I don't think GenAI is such a big issue compared to AGI.
No, you want to add anything?
No, I don't think there's anything else to add. I think, these are the things that we know of today. I think the kids are going to come up with a lot of innovation and we need to follow what they're doing pretty closely because I think the problems will follow and get more advanced and accelerated as we move on. So this is another one of those things that we'll continue to iterate on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, my fellow panelists. And thank you, audience, for being patient and, quite intrigued about. Thank you.
Thanks for having us here. Thank you.